For decades, African Americans fought for the right to be equal. They fought and protested for their freedoms, one of those freedoms being the right to an equal and fair education. Many know the stories that have been put in history books, but few know the story of a church located in the heart of Farmville, Virginia. This is the story of Beulah African Methodist Episcopal Church, a story of hope, a story of justice, a story of freedom. African American religious organizations have always played a major role in the fight for civil rights. Whether it was financially or intellectually, the Black church has been there throughout the movement. In the heart of Farmville, Virginia, on the edge of the Longwood University campus, this small and unassuming historic church was a giant structure in the civil rights movement. It was through the leadership here at Beulah African Methodist Episcopal Church that dozens of young African Americans were afforded an opportunity to learn. An opportunity that had been snatched from them by those who believed that Blacks were inferior and did not deserve a fair and equal education. Up until 1959, racism and segregation were present and documented in Prince Edward County. For 5 years, Prince Edward County refused to desegregate schools as had been mandated by law in the case known as Brown versus the Board of Education. Since Prince Edward County continued to defy these court orders, they were issued a legal mandate to either integrate or shut their doors altogether. And on June 26, 1959, the unthinkable happened. Charlie Taylor was a student at Moton High School. He recalls receiving the life-changing news from his mother.
She said that, I don't think they're going to open the schools this year. So what do you mean, open the schools? I think they're going to close the school. And my question was, why? Virginia state law had said you either integrate the school or close them.
And close them they did. Rather than desegregate, Prince Edward County chose to shut down its schools altogether, sending the resounding racially charged message saying that they'd rather have no school than to attend it with Blacks.
It brought a devastating effect on children. I can tell it now. Different people did different things. But for the most part, Black people suffered most.
But there were those who said this would not be the end of our story. And Reverend A.I. Dunlap, then the pastor of Farmville's Beulah AME Church, was one of those people. He believed that the county closing its doors was an opportunity for him to open his.
He allowed, there was a class, a junior class that was kind of missed out on their senior year. And because of A.I. Dunlap's efforts in that, he asked our bishop if that junior class could attend Kittrell College in Kittrell, North Carolina. This was a meeting place for that class, and so they would ride on a bus from here to Kittrell, North Carolina to finish their senior year.
Reverend Dunlap, who had been a teacher at Kittrell College in North Carolina, 90 miles south of Farmville, allowed for 61 of Moton's rejected Black students to come there and finish their senior year. And Charlie Taylor was one of those 61 students who made that 90-mile trek to finish his education.
He bought food and money and letters and all the other stuff over the weekend that family had come in to send to their kids, because it was some 90-some plus miles from Farmville. And I got in the car with 2 Safeway shopping bags. I didn't have a suitcase of clothes. And I listened to Reverend Griffin and I.A. Dunlap talk about, well, I don't think it's going to last forever, or maybe a couple of months or so. And I didn't know whether they were doing that for me or giving themselves some hope.
And indeed, they remained hopeful. It was at Kittrell College that Charlie Taylor met Goodwin Douglas, the man who would become his best friend and soon a major force at Beulah AME Church and a trailblazer in the course of civil rights history. Charlie Taylor recalled the moment that he knew Reverend Douglas, whom he called Goody, would change not only the face of Farmville, but leave his imprint on the civil rights movement.
Goody said, "May I say the grace?" And he looked at him and said, "Okay." And Goody said the grace, and my mother said that boy gonna make something by himself. You know what I mean? And I said, "Okay, all right. What about me? What about me?" And she said, "You follow him and you'll make something out of yourself too." So I introduced him to Reverend Griffin, and I introduced him to A.I. Dunlap, to Beulah AME Church, the whole 9 yards.
And together, through Beulah AME Church, they secured their place in the history of civil rights and began to change the face of Farmville, Virginia.
Beulah AME Church was the host to several students from the community because the schools in Prince Edward County were closed. And so they used this facility as classrooms and also as a library downstairs within our basement. That's where they had a library and also more classrooms.
While that was a temporary fix, he knew the fight for educational equality must continue. Reverend Douglas began leading student protests through the streets of Farmville. He believed that Prince Edward County may be able to take their schooling away, but not their voices, or even their passion to gain equality.
In the 1960s, they used to have a swing that was on the parsonage. That's where a lot of people gathered on the patio of the parsonage, and they protested, and they did a lot of that. I know this was a place where the people created their signs right down in the basement. This was also a place where they gathered and they strategized. They had meetings, and so some of the quote unquote they would be secret meetings, so nobody would know what they were doing. And so this was a place where they would gather to organize for those protests.
And it was in that summer of 1963 that Reverend Douglas, alongside Reverend Francis L. Griffin and Reverend Samuel Williams, demanded equality and insisted that the doors of Prince Edward County schools be opened.
It was rough times. So we demonstrated in the summer of '63. I went to Reverend Griffin. I said, "Man, they're doing something everywhere except Farmville, and something needs to be done." Reverend Goodwin Douglas, who died last year at Beulah, we demonstrated in Farmville for the opening of schools, equal opportunities in the working place, public places where we go to eat and so forth. Everybody was sitting in, waiting in the pools, standing in, everything else people were doing in the country. And we did that here.
But this fight did not come without its consequences.
One story that he always told me, the Reverend Douglas always told me, was that while he was preaching here, when he was preaching inside the pulpit of Beulah, he had to have security because there were a lot of death threats upon his life because he was striving for civil rights and justice and equality. And at that time, not a lot of people were in favor of that.
Yet, through Beulah AME, Reverend Douglas continued to organize these student protests until Prince Edward County finally reopened its schools in the summer of 1964. Beulah AME Church continues to live out its civil rights legacy. The church is on the Civil Rights Walking Tour as well as the Civil Rights and Education Heritage Trail.
The AME Church has been and always will be a beacon of hope for everyone, no matter the color, no matter the gender, no matter the sexual orientation. But we will be the beacon of hope for everyone.
I'm Autumn Childress.